Welcome everyone. We have a special guest here today. Her name is Leonie Stanfield, and just wanted to welcome all the listeners as well coming back to my podcast channel. Leonie, welcome.
Thanks, Leonie. Always good to be talking to you.
As you have all heard, you maybe can see that we both have the same name, and we're both career coaches as well. So today we will be talking about overcoming communication challenges, and Leonie Stanfield will be sharing her conceptual views of this topic of overcoming communication challenges, and then Leonie will then interview me and ask me some questions that we will be talking about practical ideas that you can take away and you can apply right away at work or even in your personal life. So before we go straight into the questions, just wanted to introduce you to Leonie, how I know her. So Leonie is a career coach and a facilitator. I've been working alongside with her since 2013. It's been a long journey. That's about, I think it's 9 years this year. And we're also part of a mastermind group for career coaches that is called the Creative Careers Entrepreneurs, and that's been going for about 3 years, where we get together and talk about best practices, how we can improve ourselves as a career coach. And so in her business, she's been a career coach for a number of years now, and but for over 25 years, she has been assisting a wide range of people in their careers. Even myself, sometimes I'll call Leonie, so I'm stuck on something, and she'll be able to give me some great, amazing ideas. So certainly that's her background. And what else? Anything else I wanted to mention? Look, I think not only we're also friends, and we love communicating and catching up all the time and staying in touch over the years. So you'll be able to hear our friendship and our connection on this podcast, and I really hope you all enjoy what we have to share. Okay, so the first question I have for you is, what are the external pressures that impact our communication?
Okay, thanks, Leonie. I think there are many, but probably three that I want to highlight today. So I think these three pressures can pose challenges for us. So one, I think we do have people pressures. So sometimes around our communication, it's the people issues that are putting pressure on that. I think we do also have time pressures with communication as well, and that can show up in lots of different ways for people. And I think we do have results pressures. So, depending on the work that you're doing and the role that you're in, you may have results that need to be demonstrated, and there's a pressure that goes with communication to get the results that you want. So I think, I'd say there are sort of external pressures that we do often feel in communicating.
I totally agree with that. I really, you said the time pressure. If you had all the time, then you can take the time to communicate effectively. So yeah, time pressure, people pressure, and results pressure. So what internal resources can shape our communication?
Yeah, so again, there's probably many, but again, three that I think are worth highlighting today. And one is energy. So I think these three areas of resources can be things that really help us. If, a tank is full of energy, it can be a great help, but they can also be areas where we might feel a bit more depleted. So I think, internally energy is one area. I think also there's determination or persistence, you might call it. So again, sometimes we might feel like we are really persisting, really determined around something. In other cases, we might not show that same. So again, it can help or hinder. And I think also a final resource can be our own expectations. So we bring, expectations of ourselves, but we bring expectations of others, and we even bring expectations of what we think will happen, the situation. And so that can, again, help us, but sometimes those expectations can actually get in the way.
Yes, our expectations, and then the expectations of others as well that they have of you. So all of that can be quite a lot of expectations that we're trying to fulfill in just communicating effectively. And I really like energy, like depending on how your energy levels for the day, whether you then are able to then communicate effectively. So moving on to the next question, where I'm sure there's going to be a lot of information in this one, is on how do we best navigate these internal and external influences?
Okay. So again, probably many ways that people have of navigating these, and they do it very successfully. 3 areas I want to highlight again. And this will be thinking about our intention or our outcome. So that's the first sort of area, is thinking about, are you aware of, are you paying attention to, what is your intention or outcome from this conversational piece of communication? So I think that's one area. Also navigating what you know. So again, I think it's about paying attention to what do you know. And so again, sometimes we have the knowledge in place to help assist us with a particular conversation or framing some communication. Sometimes we don't have all of the knowledge and we're trying to do it with only half the knowledge. So again, being aware of what knowledge do you have around this. And thirdly, we get to the idea of beliefs. So again, it is awareness or attention on beliefs. So what are you bringing in terms of what you are believing about yourself as you communicate, or in the preparation of it? What are you bringing about what you believe about the other person or the other people you're communicating to? What are your beliefs around the situation? So if you've had success in the past, does that foster beliefs that this will be successful in the future, or vice versa? If it hasn't worked well in the past, what happens to your beliefs about what's going to happen now? So I think that coming back to navigating this, I think those 3 areas of paying some attention and being clear about what is your intention or what is the outcome you want. I think also focusing in on what you know and what you need to know for that communication to be successful. And then being aware of the beliefs that might be informing your approach with that communication. And I would say that I think that in navigating this, there are a couple of principles or practices that I find work really well for me. So I'll share those. I actually think it is about attention out. So even though I've been saying be aware of your stuff, I actually think when we come into communicating, we do want to be paying attention to the other person. So communicating is 2-way. And we want to do that in a way where we're actually looking to learn, I think. So that's a different sort of attention, when we're actually looking to learn. And so I think when you are paying attention and you're looking to learn, then that sets the stage to almost slow down and notice more. Notice more about what's happening for yourself, but notice more about what's happening for someone else. And notice it with curiosity and kindness. But I think the temptation for many of us is to notice it with judgment, either judgment on ourselves or judgment on others, or judgment on situations. But I find that trying to hold the judgment off a bit and trying to be curious first is really, really helpful.
I love it. I think it was about, I think, 1 or 2 years, probably 2 years ago, that you presented at one of the monthly events, and the topic was called, we had 6 questions for conversations that connect. I've got the handout here. And the group member, the communities, the Inspire Me community, my focus, they actually loved what you shared. And what really stood out was what you just mentioned, intention. So what is your intention going into that conversation? And as you just said, exactly, that if you're going in with the intention to learn and be curious and kind, then it's a different quality, different kind of intention that you can actually start to notice, start playing with it. So what is your intention going into this meeting? And sometimes actually what from that event that you delivered, I thought, wow, like, actually communicate your intention to the other person. So that way their fears they may be thinking that, they've got certain fears in their mind. And when you actually share your intention, that you then can eliminate the fears that the other person might have. And so very powerful, technique to, what is your intention? Be clear of your intention and lead the conversation with that. So thank you. Is there anything else you'd like to add in terms of your conceptual view?
Yeah, well, I was listening to a podcast this morning called The Hidden Brain, and which is a fascinating take on how our brains work. But the research that comes through around some of our self-delusions and one around a likability gap. So there seems to be research that suggests when we're in a conversation with people that, and maybe particularly new people, we don't know so well, that that we think the conversation's gone well, but we think from their perspective, oh, they probably don't think it's gone as well. So we're more negative, and we think, oh, maybe they probably don't like me as much. And the ironic thing is that both parties are thinking that. And so it's quite interesting. We often have a negativity bias about things. So I just would say, hold your beliefs loosely until you see evidence for them. They can be very, very useful, but sometimes they're not always true.
So hold your beliefs loosely until you see evidence. Well, a round of applause from me and everyone who's listening. Thank you. So when you're ready, I will share my views.
Yeah, thanks. Look, it's great to be able to ask you now some really practical questions about what does this actually look like, in practice for people. So, thinking about communication within teams, I think, I'm interested to know, what do you think are some of the challenges that you see at the moment in communication within teams?
Yes, there's so many challenges that we can talk all day about. But certainly what I've noticed within teams that I've worked in the past year or 2 years, as well as some of my colleagues who are in teams where, because we are not in a face-to-face environment as we used to be, we used to have those moments before and after a meeting to connect and have a little bit of small talk, and that's where you build that connection with people. Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. Not miss that. Yeah.
And we're lacking those moments of connection. So that's what I'm seeing as a key challenge, and as around communications, like really, are you connecting before you communicate? So one of there has been times where I've seen this happen over and over again, where team members are not communicating to each other. They're just working solo at home, and that's what I see as a challenge for how do you build that connection.
Yeah,
so that's one of the challenges.
Yeah, and you're right. We've sort of been thrust into this space where it's exacerbated that the chance that happens, that we don't communicate as much, perhaps as we previously did. So do you have any simple approaches that you would recommend for people?
I've got a few approaches, and they are simple, and this is some of the managers that I have seen, some of my clients have actually shared with me this works. So some people are operating using Teams, Microsoft Teams, within their team. And you can create a chat room for your team members. So in the morning when you start work, you just log in and just send each other messages. Something so simple like that. Just every day you go into work, you have a group chat. All you have to do is say good morning, and that's it. So you're in. So people know that you're in. Sometimes people don't even know that people are actually working, whether they're in or not, whether they're on leave or not. So that's one simple way that I thought, that's very simple, yet, how many teams actually do that? Another one is what I heard a very senior manager actually implement like a virtual meeting. You're in the meeting, but you can do that via Zoom, you can do that via Teams meeting, and you're just there. You don't need to actually communicate with each other, but you're just connected online while you are actually working. So simple techniques, and I thought, that's something I wanted to share with everyone who's listening. What do you think?
Yeah. Oh, I totally agree. I think that's really interesting to recognise that we can set up an environment that facilitates communication, or we can set an environment that doesn't. So you're right, people are working with teams. So yeah, why not set a practice, an expectation that we use the technology in the ways that are going to actually help us stay more connected. Yeah, and I guess in doing that it's the culture happens as you do it, but I guess you have to have the leadership to get that started and the structure to make it happen.
Absolutely. But just so my simple approach that I would personally like to share is that just to make a phone call. People are just not making phone calls anymore. We do. Now and then I'll call you, say hi, and you'll call me, say hello. But just having simple phone calls just to chat, whether it's online, whether it's on a traditional phone call, 5-10 minutes, or I actually have a virtual coffee online and just chat online. It might just take 15 minutes of your day, but we're really lacking connection at work. That's what I can see what's happening right now. And I think that, in 2022, how do we get back into face-to-face environments to build stronger connections so we can communicate more effectively?
Yeah, so true. And that foundation of connection is just incredibly important. Great. Okay, so I guess I'm thinking there are obviously some things that help us in communicating and help us stay connected. And you talked about making the phone call. So if you were going to help someone who wanted some advice on building their listening skills, do you have a top tip or something that you suggest that will help people build their listening skills?
Absolutely. When I coach and train clients in communication skills and customer service training, most people tend to listen, and they're listening to hurry up and get to the end of that person talking for them to jump in to say their part or to provide a solution. A lot of people would jump into solution mode. And sometimes we're not even aware that we're doing this. It's like, okay, I'm listening. So one simple thing that I do when I'm coaching my clients is spending 40-50 minutes listening to the clients, and I actually say, as I'm listening to that person in my mind, listen. And I say it quite often because I have a tendency as well. Sometimes I want to just jump into solution. I know exactly what the problem is, but you've got to, like you said, you've got to hold back your judgment, hold back your beliefs, and just see the evidence before you actually give your observation or ideas, etc. So it's just simple things to say, listen in your mind, and you'll find that you're training your mind to be more present and not jump to the future where you want to be able to speak as quickly as possible. And then, and we're talking about building connection in communication, where after that person speaks, don't just jump into straight away your point of view. Take a moment, even as a second, to just sort of pause for a second, or to then comment or acknowledge that person before jumping in to talk about your perspective. So I think that's a really simple way to build a stronger connection and that rapport with someone. There's listening is so powerful, as you know, Leonie, and you're one of the best listeners that I know. So you build this beautiful connection with the mind and with the heart with that person.
Yes, look, thank you. I struggle with listening. Well, I think we all, and it's one of those things that when we know how important it is to feel heard, to not just know that someone's listening to you, but actually to experience that connection of feeling heard. And yet, I'm aware for me, I'm like you, I can so easily just jump in because I want to solve something or I think I know what they're talking about. And even if all of that's true, it's not the same as actually holding the space for someone and actually hearing more. So I'm going to take your advice. I love that idea of reminding, myself to listen. And I think it's a really good point about thinking about, you talked about listening skills. A skill needs practice. So we can actually improve our ability. But as you said, it is about training ourselves, training our brains to be more present. So I love that. I think that's such practical advice.
Thank you.
And I'm wondering then, so a final question for you in thinking about, we often coach people around interviews, and I know you're a master at this, and I've heard so many great reports from people who you've coached and their results and how grateful they are for just making such a difference for them. So what do you think makes an excellent communicator in an interview?
Again, we can talk about this for a whole hour. So Leonie also is a career coach, so she also coaches people on their interview skills. But I was thinking how to respond to this question in a really clear and concise way, so that our listeners can learn from this and apply the technique. Well, we just talked about listening. So the first step is to actually listen carefully to the question. Do not assume what the question is. Listen carefully to the question. Interviewers actually appreciate when the candidate actually takes a moment to consider their response before giving it. So to listen carefully to the question, and then when you do respond, you have some structure in your response, using the famous star or car technique and giving your example. And if you don't know what star and car technique is, simply Google it or look at some of the resources I have on my website. And so the structure of the response it needs to flow really well. And thirdly, it is then the delivery. So you're using verbal and non-verbal communication. Crossing your arms is a no-go in an interview. Sitting too far away is showing maybe you're not that interested, so lean forward a little bit. So using eye contact. So verbal and non-verbal communication skills to be engaging with your hand gestures, open body language. And but then more importantly, even if you do all of that, and if your example is not relevant, then you lose out on scoring. So you got to make sure that your response is relevant to the role that you're applying for. So simply, listen, structure responses, and your delivery. Effective delivery, engaging, and to be really mindful that is it relevant to the question and to the organisation.
I love such practical, clear advice. That's so, so true. And interestingly, I think they're all things that you can control, or at least you can influence. Because I just hear often from so many people that, they get nervous about interviews because they don't know what to expect, or they won't know the questions, or, they've had bad experiences. So they don't actually feel like there's much control they have. And, in some ways, those things that you talked about are really the things about learning to prepare well. So that when you are in that place, you can listen, you can be present, because, you've thought about relevant examples. You've thought about what are they looking for? What kind of questions might they ask? You've done a bit of practice with a career coach, or you've videoed yourself, or you've at least listened to some answers recorded on your phone, so you've got a bit of an awareness around, you know, how you present comfortably and all of that. So I really like that those are very, very practical suggestions that people can actually action.
Thank you, Leonie. I also would like to mention that mindfulness is what has helped myself, and I think yourself as well, Leonie, in terms of our communicating with our clients, our stakeholders, and so forth. Because mindfulness enables us to slow down and really catch ourselves before we respond to something. It just takes a moment to sort of slow down and take a breath before so you can think about your response, so you can think about your facial gestures before you respond to something. So I do want to just put an ad in just to make sure that people are aware that I'm running a mindfulness webinar the second Saturday of each month from now to November. And so if you don't know about the mindfulness webinar, just check it out on LinkedIn. I post on LinkedIn about it. So certainly mindfulness really has shaped the way I communicate to my clients and colleagues and so forth. And I think, yeah, you're nodding your head away. It's like, it's so true. So if you don't, and so have a look into how mindfulness can make a difference in your career.
Yeah, and I love that you're sort of serving people by really, you know, providing an opportunity for people to get an experience of that, to understand what it actually looks like, what it means, and how it can help them. Because sometimes we make assumptions that, oh, well, that's for someone else, but actually it's hugely powerful to be more present. And so, yeah, I think you do a great job of helping people access that, understand that, and get an experience of it.
Yes, and if you have listeners, if you can see the connection Leonie and I have, it's all of our meditation mindfulness is coming through. So if you really enjoy this podcast, then you know, have a look at meditation mindfulness that can really help you navigate the communication, being more effective at communicating, and overcome communication challenges in your career. Thank you for listening, and thank you so much, Leonie. Thoroughly enjoyed our podcast today.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.